Life is tough, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Right now, you might feel stuck, overwhelmed, or drained by negativity. This audiobook will show you exactly how to stay positive, take control, and build unshakable happiness, no matter what life throws at you. The Good Life Formula. Audiobook. Introduction. Right now, you might be thinking this is just another happiness audiobook filled with empty promises and feel-good platitudes. You've probably read others, followed their advice for a while, felt temporarily better, and then watched that positivity fade when reality hit hard. Maybe you've even started to believe that lasting happiness just isn't in the cards for you. I get it. The world has sold you a destructive myth about happiness, that it's something you achieve once you've checked all the right boxes. Get the degree, land the job, find the relationship, buy the house, reach the milestone. Then finally, you'll be happy. But look around. How many people do you know who have all those things and still feel empty inside? Here's what nobody tells you. Happiness isn't a destination. It's not a reward waiting at the finish line of some imaginary race. It's a skill, a practice, a choice you make every single day, especially when life gets messy. I'm not here to tell you that positive thinking will solve all your problems. I won't insult your intelligence by suggesting that you just need to choose happiness and everything will magically work out. Life is hard. It's unfair. It will knock you down repeatedly, often when you least expect it. But what if I told you that you could build a happiness so solid that even your worst days couldn't break it? Not by ignoring pain or pretending everything's fine, but by developing real mental strength and emotional resilience that turns life's challenges into fuel for growth. Chapter 1. The Happiness Illusion. Every day, millions of people wake up believing they're just one achievement away from happiness. You know that feeling. The voice that whispers, "Once I get that promotion," or "After I buy that house," or "When I finally lose those last 20 pounds." You've lived it. We all have. It's the eternal promise that happiness waits just around the next corner, after the next milestone. But what happens when you finally turn that corner? Observe Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all time. 28 medals, 23 of them gold. He achieved what most athletes only dream of: global recognition, financial security, and a legacy that will outlive him. By all conventional measures, he had made it. Yet in 2014, after dominating the Olympics, Phelps found himself sitting in his room for days, contemplating whether life was worth living. "I thought the medal count would bring me happiness," he later revealed in interviews. "I thought breaking world records would make me feel complete. But after every achievement, after every celebration, I felt emptier than before." This isn't just about Michael Phelps. Research in positive psychology has consistently shown that external achievements, even extraordinary ones, provide only temporary spikes in happiness. Scientists call this phenomenon hedonic adaptation, or the hedonic treadmill. Like a hamster wheel of happiness, we chase the next big thing, convinced it will finally bring us joy, only to find ourselves exactly where we started once we achieve it. Think about your own life. Remember that job you were certain would change everything? That relationship you thought would complete you? That goal you were convinced would finally make you happy? How long did that happiness last before you started looking toward the next target? The truth is, we've been sold a destructive myth about happiness, that it's something we achieve rather than something we practice. It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket by adding more water rather than fixing the holes. Real-world evidence of this appears everywhere. A study found that beyond meeting basic needs, additional income had no impact on day-to-day happiness. Lottery winners, after their initial euphoria, typically return to their baseline happiness levels within months. Even superstar athletes and celebrities, despite having everything, often struggle with depression and emptiness. But here's where we turn the corner. Understanding this isn't meant to discourage you, it's meant to liberate you. Because once you realize that happiness isn't waiting for you at some future finish line, you can stop postponing it and start cultivating it right now. Take Luca, a client in the financial sector. He spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, convinced that making partner would finally bring him the satisfaction he craved. When I finally got the promotion, he says, I celebrated for exactly 1 day. Then I felt more lost than ever. I had everything I thought I wanted, but I felt nothing. Luca's breakthrough came when he stopped tying his happiness to his title. Instead, he started focusing on daily moments of engagement and meaning. He dusted off his old guitar. He began leaving work early enough to have dinner with his kids. He started taking morning walks, simply to enjoy the sunrise. For the first time, he recalls, I stopped waiting to be happy and started practicing happiness in small ways every day. Within 6 months, Luca reported feeling more fulfilled than he had in his entire career, not because his circumstances had changed, but because his approach to happiness had transformed. He stopped treating it like a destination and started treating it like a skill. This shift is available to you right now. You don't need to wait for the promotion, the relationship, the achievement, or whatever else you've convinced yourself needs to happen first. Happiness isn't something you chase. It's something you choose, create, and cultivate in this moment. Your challenge for today is simple but powerful. Identify one thing you've been postponing your happiness for. One, I'll be happy when. Statement that's been running your life. Write it down. Then, instead of waiting for that future moment, find one small way to create happiness today. It might be as simple as savoring your morning coffee, calling an old friend, or spending 10 minutes doing something that brings you joy. Remember, your life isn't a dress rehearsal, and happiness isn't the encore. It's the main performance happening right now. What will you choose to do with this moment? Chapter 2. Rewiring your mind for joy. In 1975, an experienced hiker named Julian Kopke fell 10,000 feet from a plane into the Peruvian rainforest. The aircraft had been struck by lightning, tearing apart mid-flight, sending the 17-year-old plummeting through the sky while still strapped to her seat row. Miraculously, she survived the impact, but that was just the beginning of her ordeal. Alone in one of the world's most dangerous environments, with a broken collarbone, a deep gash in her arm, and one eye swollen shut, Julianne faced a choice that would determine her survival. Her mind, like yours and mine, was programmed to panic, to fixate on the dangers lurking in every shadow, the seemingly impossible odds of survival, the mounting pain and exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Instead, she did something remarkable. She took control of her thoughts. Rather than letting fear paralyze her, she focused on what she could control. Small, logical steps. First, finding water. Then, following that water downstream. Walking, resting, repeating. For 11 days, she navigated through the dense jungle, fighting off infection, avoiding predators, and maintaining her mental composure until she finally reached safety. Julianne's story isn't just about physical survival. It's about the extraordinary power of the mind to either help us thrive or hold us back. Your brain, like Julianne's, wasn't designed for happiness. It was engineered through millions of years of evolution to do one thing: keep you alive. This explains why you can receive 100 compliments but obsess over one criticism. Why you can achieve numerous successes but lie awake at night replaying your failures. Why anxiety feels more natural than peace. And why fear often speaks louder than hope. Scientists call this the negativity bias, our brain's tendency to react more strongly to negative experiences than positive ones. Research shows that negative experiences stick to your brain like Velcro, while positive experiences slide off like Teflon. This isn't a flaw in your character. It's a feature of your neural architecture. Your ancestors survived because they remembered and avoided dangers, not because they stopped to smell the roses. The science behind this transformation is fascinating. Studies in neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections throughout life, show that we can literally reshape our brain's structure through consistent mental practices. When you repeatedly direct your attention toward positive experiences, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with well-being and resilience. Take Maria, an emergency room nurse in Chicago. For years, she found herself mentally replaying every difficult case, every near miss, every moment of doubt. The stress began affecting her sleep, her relationships, and her ability to find joy in her work. I was doing exactly what I'd always wanted to do, she says, but my mind turned every shift into a highlight reel of potential disasters. Then Maria learned about neuroplasticity and began a simple daily practice. At the end of each shift, she would write down 3 things that went right: a successful procedure, a moment of connection with a patient, even something as simple as remembering to eat lunch. At first, it felt forced, almost artificial. My brain wanted to add "but" to every positive thing, she recalls. The surgery went well, but the patient recovered, but I had to consciously stop myself from negating the good. Within weeks, Maria noticed a shift. Her mind began automatically noticing positive moments throughout her day. She found herself feeling more engaged, more present, and more satisfied with her work. I wasn't ignoring the challenges, she explains. I was just finally giving equal attention to what was going right. This isn't about positive thinking or denying reality. It's about correcting your brain's natural imbalance. Think of it like calibrating a scale that's been weighted toward negativity. You're not eliminating the negative weight. You're simply adding enough positive weight to create balance. Neuroscientists have identified several practices that effectively rewire the brain for greater happiness. Gratitude practices activate the hypothalamus, which regulates stress, and the ventral tegmental area, which produces pleasure-inducing dopamine. Regular meditation actually increases gray matter in regions associated with emotional regulation and well-being. Even simple acts of kindness trigger the release of oxytocin, reducing anxiety and enhancing mood. But perhaps most powerfully, cognitive reframing, the practice of consciously shifting your perspective on challenging situations, can actually create new neural pathways that make positive thinking more automatic over time. Chapter 3. Taking ownership of your happiness. When actor Keanu Reeves was a young man, life dealt him a series of devastating blows that would have broken most people. First, his best friend River Phoenix died of a drug overdose outside the Viper Room in Los Angeles. Then, his girlfriend Jennifer Syme lost their baby at 8 months pregnant. 18 months later, Jennifer herself died in a car accident. Through it all, his sister battled leukemia, requiring his constant support and care. Most people would have crumbled under such relentless tragedy. They would have become bitter, withdrawn, or lost themselves in destructive habits. And who could blame them? When life keeps knocking you down, it's tempting to stay down. But Keanu made a different choice. Instead of letting circumstances dictate his happiness, he chose to take ownership of his response to life's challenges. He poured himself into his craft, dedicated millions to cancer research, and became known throughout Hollywood for his extraordinary kindness to everyone from co-stars to crew members. He didn't just survive his tragedies, he used them as fuel to create meaning and spread joy to others. The science behind happiness reveals a surprising truth. External circumstances account for only about 10% of our long-term happiness. This finding, established through decades of research in positive psychology, challenges everything we've been taught about happiness. We're conditioned to believe that our joy depends on our job, our relationship status, our bank account, or how others treat us. But the data tells a different story. Studies of lottery winners and paralysis victims show that within a year of their life-changing events, whether extraordinarily positive or negative, most people return to their baseline level of happiness. This phenomenon, known as hedonic adaptation, proves that circumstances matter far less than we think. What matters more? Your mindset, your habits, and most importantly, your sense of agency. The belief that you, not external forces, control your happiness. Consider the groundbreaking research. After studying thousands of individuals across different cultures and circumstances, he discovered that people who take ownership of their emotional well-being consistently report higher levels of life satisfaction, regardless of their external situation. They don't wait for happiness to happen to them. They actively create it. James was a mid-level manager at a technology firm who embodied the opposite approach. For years, he blamed his unhappiness on everything around him: his micromanaging boss, his lengthy commute, his insufficient salary. Once I get promoted, he'd tell himself, then I'll be happy. Or, when I finally make 6 figures, everything will be better. But the promotion came and went. The raise arrived but brought no lasting joy. Why? Because James had outsourced his happiness to factors beyond his control. He was playing the waiting game and losing. The turning point came during a conversation with his teenage daughter. "Dad," she said, "why do you let your boss decide if you're going to have a good day?" That simple question shattered his perspective. He realized he'd given away his power to choose happiness. James started small. Instead of dwelling on his boss's latest criticism, he focused on improving his skills. Rather than complaining about his commute, he used that time to listen to educational podcasts. He began taking lunch breaks to walk in the nearby park instead of eating at his desk. He started a side project he was passionate about. None of these changes altered his external circumstances. His boss was still difficult. His commute was still long. But by taking ownership of his responses and his daily choices, James transformed his experience of life. Within months, his colleagues noticed the difference. Within a year, he had launched his own successful consulting business, not because he was chasing happiness, but because he had already claimed it. This isn't about positive thinking or denying life's very real challenges. It's about recognizing that while you can't control everything that happens to you, you absolutely can control how you respond. You can choose where to focus your attention, what meaning to assign to events, and what actions to take in response. Happiness isn't a gift that life bestows upon the lucky few. It's a skill you develop through conscious choice and consistent practice. Every moment presents an opportunity to take ownership of your emotional state, to choose your response, to build the life you want regardless of circumstances. Think of it like learning to play an instrument. You can't control whether you have natural talent, but you can control how much you practice. You can't control what others think of your music, but you can control how dedicated you are to improving. The same principles apply to happiness. Your circumstances might create the stage, but you write the script. You direct the play. You choose the role you'll play, victim or victor, passive observer or active creator of your experience. The challenge for today: identify one area where you've been waiting for happiness to arrive. What's one action you can take today to own your happiness instead? The power has been in your hands all along. Now, use it. Chapter 4: Training Your Mind for Positivity. In 1965, Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, gave a lecture where he shared a stunning revelation from his time in concentration camps. While imprisoned in unimaginable conditions, he noticed something surprising. Some prisoners, despite the horror surrounding them, still managed to find moments of hope, kindness, and even humor. They had no reason to feel joy, yet they did. Frankl realized that external circumstances do not determine our emotional state. Our perspective does. If men could find hope inside a concentration camp, what does that say about the power you have over your own happiness in today's world? This truth challenges everything you might believe about positivity. Most people think optimism requires good circumstances, a comfortable life, supportive relationships, or at least basic security. But Frankl's observation reveals something far more powerful. Your mindset can transcend your circumstances. But here's where it gets interesting. These benefits don't require your life to be perfect. Even small moments of positivity, a genuine smile, a moment of gratitude, or a brief connection with another person, can trigger this upward spiral. The key isn't having a perfect life. It's learning to notice and amplify the good that already exists. We live in a world flooded with negativity. Bad news, toxic people, stress, and social media comparisons. It's easy to feel like optimism is naive or impossible. But staying positive isn't about ignoring reality. It's about choosing where to focus your attention. Neuroscience shows that your brain has a built-in filter, the reticular activating system, that prioritizes whatever you consistently focus on. If you focus on negativity, your brain will find more of it. If you train it to look for solutions, opportunities, and moments of joy, your experience of life transforms. Think of your attention like a flashlight in a dark room. Whatever you shine it on becomes your reality. If you constantly point it at problems, threats, and complaints, that's what your world becomes. But you can choose to illuminate possibilities, beauty, and progress instead. This isn't about suppressing negative emotions or pretending everything is fine. Toxic positivity, the belief that you should be positive all the time, is just as harmful as chronic negativity. Real optimism acknowledges difficulties while maintaining faith in your ability to handle them. Take the story of Elijah, a schoolteacher in an underfunded urban district. Every day, he faced overwhelming challenges: behavioral issues, lack of resources, bureaucratic pressures, and the weight of knowing his students faced serious hardships at home. The constant exposure to problems and limitations was crushing his spirit. Initially, Elijah coped by venting to colleagues, scrolling through social media during breaks, and consuming news that reinforced his pessimistic worldview. But this only amplified his stress and despair. His breaking point came when he realized his negativity was affecting his students, the very people he wanted to inspire. Instead of waiting for his circumstances to change, he changed his focus. First, he implemented a good news journal where he recorded at least 3 positive moments from each school day. Some days, these were as simple as "James smiled today" or "Maria finally understood fractions." He started limiting his exposure to news and social media, replacing that time with inspiring books and conversations with optimistic colleagues. He created a wins wall in his classroom where students could post their achievements, no matter how small. He began each class by sharing a positive observation about something he'd noticed. When problems arose, he trained himself to ask, "What can we learn from this?" instead of, "Why does this always happen?" Within months, the transformation was remarkable. His stress levels dropped, his enthusiasm returned, and most importantly, his students began responding differently. They started looking for positive moments too, creating a ripple effect of optimism in their challenging environment. The science behind Elijah's transformation is clear. Study shows that practicing gratitude, limiting exposure to negative influences, and intentionally seeking positive experiences literally rewires your brain. Each time you choose to focus on the good, you strengthen neural pathways that make optimism more natural. This doesn't mean ignoring problems or avoiding necessary changes. Instead, it means approaching challenges from a position of strength rather than despair. When you train your mind to stay positive, you become more resilient, creative, and effective at solving problems. Your challenge today: take inventory of your mental diet. What negative influences can you cut back on? What positive ones can you amplify? The world may be chaotic, but you decide what kind of reality you live in. Chapter 5: Transforming Pain into Power. Oprah Winfrey was born into poverty, suffered childhood abuse, and faced countless rejections early in her career. By all accounts, she had every reason to stay bitter, broken, or resentful. But instead of letting her pain define her, she used it as fuel. She has often said, "Turn your wounds into wisdom." What if your struggles weren't just obstacles, but the very thing that could propel you forward? The truth about pain is both simpler and more profound than most realize. Every scar you carry, every disappointment you've endured, every moment that brought you to your knees, these aren't just memories to survive, they're raw material for transformation. Think about the strongest people you know. Dig deep into their stories and you'll almost always find that their power wasn't born in comfort, but forged in fire. Research shows that post-traumatic growth, where individuals become stronger after adversity, is just as real as post-traumatic stress. Studies have documented remarkable patterns of positive change following trauma. Deeper relationships, increased personal strength, greater appreciation for life, and expanded possibilities. The key isn't avoiding pain, which is impossible, but learning to reframe it as a source of strength and wisdom. The most resilient people don't see challenges as setbacks, but as stepping stones to something greater. They understand that comfort zones are where dreams go to die, and that true growth often requires discomfort. This isn't about minimizing your pain or pretending it doesn't hurt. It's about refusing to let that pain be the end of your story. Meet Daniel, a former college basketball player who suffered a devastating knee injury during what should have been his breakthrough season. The physical pain was intense, but the emotional anguish was worse. Basketball wasn't just his sport. It was his identity, his future, his everything. For weeks, he spiraled into depression, avoiding teammates and skipping classes. But one morning, staring at his physical therapy exercises, he asked himself a powerful question. How can I use this? That question changed everything. Instead of focusing on what he'd lost, he started paying attention to what he could learn. He noticed how his physical therapist combined technical knowledge with emotional support. He observed how different patients responded to different motivation styles. Daniel started volunteering at youth basketball camps, working with injured players. He discovered he had a gift for connecting with discouraged athletes, helping them maintain hope during recovery. His personal experience with injury gave him credibility and empathy that no perfect coach could match. Today, Daniel runs a successful athletic performance and rehabilitation center. He's helped hundreds of athletes not just recover from injuries, but come back stronger. His injury didn't end his basketball journey. It transformed it into something more meaningful than he could have imagined. The same possibility exists in your pain. Those rejections that still sting, they're teaching you resilience. That heartbreak you survived, it's deepening your capacity for empathy. That failure that keeps you up at night, it's showing you what really matters. This isn't about toxic positivity or denying the reality of suffering. Pain hurts. Trauma leaves scars. But you get to decide what those scars mean. Every wound can become a source of wisdom. Every setback can strengthen your resolve. Every disappointment can clarify your direction. Your pain isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of something powerful. Your challenge today: think about a past struggle you've been through. How did it shape you? How can you use it as a source of growth rather than regret? Your past doesn't define you. What you do with it does. Chapter 6. The Power of Your Inner Voice. In 2011, tennis champion Novak Djokovic was on the verge of collapse in the Australian Open finals. Exhausted, dehydrated, and losing ground fast, he did something that changed the match. He started talking to himself out loud. Not just random words, but intentional, empowering affirmations. I am strong. I will not quit. I control my mind. His energy shifted. His game turned around. He won. The difference? He took control of his inner dialogue instead of letting it control him. That moment wasn't just about tennis. It was about the extraordinary power of self-talk. Every second of every day, you're having a conversation with yourself. This internal dialogue shapes your reality more profoundly than any external circumstance. The question isn't whether you talk to yourself. Everyone does. The question is, what are you saying? And is it serving you? Research in cognitive psychology has consistently shown that self-talk isn't just motivational fluff. It's a neurological game changer. When you speak to yourself, you're literally programming your brain's neural pathways. Negative self-talk: I can't do this. I'm not good enough. Everything always goes wrong. Creates neural patterns that reinforce those beliefs. But positive, intentional self-talk does the opposite. It builds new neural pathways that support confidence, resilience, and success. Researchers found that the way people talk to themselves during challenging situations can dramatically affect their performance and emotional state. His studies revealed that something as simple as changing from first person, I can't handle this, to second person, you've got this, self-talk can significantly reduce anxiety and improve performance. But mastering your inner dialogue isn't just about positive thinking. It's about strategic thinking. Olympic athletes, top executives, and high performers across every field use specific self-talk techniques to maintain focus, overcome obstacles, and perform at their peak. They understand that the voice in their head is either their greatest ally or their worst enemy. Take the story of Isabel, a marketing executive who spent years battling imposter syndrome. Her inner dialogue was a constant stream of doubt. You're going to mess this up. They're going to find out you're not qualified. You don't deserve to be here. These thoughts weren't just unpleasant. They were sabotaging her performance and happiness. The turning point came when Isabel started treating her inner dialogue like a skill to be mastered, rather than a force beyond her control. She began by simply observing her thoughts, noticing how often she defaulted to self-criticism. Then she started consciously replacing negative statements with more empowering ones. Instead of, "I'm not ready for this presentation," she'd say, "I'm preparing thoroughly and learning with each practice run." Rather than, "I'll probably fail," she'd tell herself, "Every attempt teaches me something valuable." When "I'm not good enough" crept in, she'd counter with, "I'm growing and improving every day." At first, these new statements felt forced and artificial, but neuroscience shows that repetition is key to rewiring neural pathways. The more Isabel practiced intentional self-talk, the more natural it became. Within months, her confidence grew. Her presentations improved. She started taking on bigger challenges. A year later, she had secured a promotion and was leading major projects she wouldn't have dared to attempt before. The transformation wasn't magic. It was methodology. By consciously directing her inner dialogue, Isabel changed her self-image, which changed her actions, which changed her results. This same process is available to you. Your mind is like a garden. It will grow whatever you plant in it. Left unattended, weeds of negative self-talk will naturally take over. But with conscious cultivation, you can grow thoughts that nourish and empower you. Start by becoming aware of your current self-talk patterns. What do you say to yourself when facing challenges? How do you speak to yourself after mistakes? What's your internal narrative about your capabilities and worth? Then begin the work of intentional reprogramming. This isn't about denying reality or pretending everything is perfect. It's about choosing language that empowers rather than diminishes you. Instead of, "This is impossible," try, "This is challenging, and I'm learning how to handle it." Replace, "I'm not good at this" with, "I'm developing this skill." Transform. "I always mess things up" into, "I learn and grow from every experience." Remember Djokovic on that tennis court? He didn't deny his exhaustion or pretend it wasn't difficult. Instead, he chose words that reinforced his strength and resilience. You can do the same in your daily battles. The process is simple, but it requires consistency. Your inner dialogue is a powerful tool, perhaps the most powerful tool you possess for shaping your experience of life. Every thought is either moving you toward or away from your goals, either building you up or tearing you down. The voice in your head will always be there. The question is, will it be your cheerleader or your critic, your coach or your saboteur? The choice is yours, and it's a choice you make moment by moment, word by word. Your challenge today: identify one negative thought you often repeat and rewrite it into an empowering statement. Speak it out loud. Your words shape your reality, so choose them wisely. Chapter 7: Breaking Free from the Past. In 2007, world-famous actor Robert Downey Jr. was at a crossroads. After years of battling addiction, multiple arrests, and being written off by Hollywood, his past seemed inescapable. But instead of letting his past failures define him, he made a choice. He would not be a prisoner of who he used to be. He rebuilt himself, one decision at a time, eventually reclaiming his career and becoming one of the most beloved actors of his generation. His story proves one simple truth: your past may shape you, but it does not have to define you. The journey wasn't easy. Between 1996 and 2001, Downey faced multiple arrests, failed drug tests, and even spent time in California State Prison. He lost roles, relationships, and respect in the industry. By all conventional wisdom, his career was over. Hollywood had written him off as another cautionary tale, another talented star who burned out too soon. But Downey refused to accept that narrative. In 2003, he made a pivotal decision. He wouldn't just try to overcome his past. He would transform it into fuel for his future. He embraced sobriety not as a restriction, but as a gateway to freedom. He approached each day as an opportunity to prove himself anew, not to atone for old sins. The result? He didn't just recover, he soared. His role as Tony Stark in Iron Man 2008 wasn't just a comeback. It was a rebirth. He transformed from Hollywood's liability into one of its most bankable and respected stars. More importantly, he found peace with his journey, often speaking about how his past struggles gave him the perspective and gratitude he needed to truly appreciate his present. We all carry the weight of our past: mistakes, regrets, trauma, or missed opportunities. Some people let that weight drag them down forever, while others break free and move forward. The difference? It's not about erasing the past, which is impossible, but about rewriting its meaning. Neuroscience shows that memories are not fixed. They are reconstructed every time we recall them. This means you have the power to change your relationship with your past by seeing it not as a burden, but as a teacher. Think about this. Every time you remember an event, you're not actually accessing a perfect recording. You're reconstructing that memory based on your current perspective. This is why two people can remember the same event differently, and why your own memories can shift over time. This isn't a flaw in your memory, it's an opportunity for healing and growth. Research has demonstrated that the emotional impact of memories can be altered through conscious reframing. When you choose to view past challenges as learning experiences rather than failures, you literally change how your brain processes those memories. The pain doesn't disappear, but its power over you diminishes. Holding on to resentment, guilt, or shame only poisons you. But choosing to forgive, to let go, and to learn from your experiences unlocks freedom. This isn't about minimizing past hurt or pretending everything was fine. It's about refusing to let those experiences determine your future. Take the story of Avery, a marketing executive who spent 3 years trapped in the shadow of a failed relationship. She had invested everything in what she thought was her forever person, only to have it end in betrayal. The pain was real, but her response to it was making everything worse. Every decision she made was filtered through the lens of that heartbreak. She turned down promising job opportunities because they reminded her of plans she'd made with her ex. She avoided social events where she might have to explain her single status. She even stopped pursuing her passion for photography because it had been their thing. "I felt like I was living in a prison of my own making," Avery later shared. "I was so focused on what I'd lost that I couldn't see what I might gain." The turning point came during a conversation with her mentor. "What if this breakup wasn't the end of your story?" her mentor asked, "but the beginning of a better one?" That simple question shattered Avery's perspective. She started questioning her narrative. Instead of seeing the relationship as a waste of 3 years, she began recognizing the growth it had sparked. She had learned to stand up for herself, to recognize her worth, to communicate more clearly. These weren't failures. They were valuable lessons she could carry forward. Avery started small. She picked up her camera again, this time photographing subjects that moved her, not just what others wanted to see. She accepted a project at work that scared her, knowing that growth often feels uncomfortable. She even started dating again, not to replace what she'd lost, but to explore who she'd become. Within 6 months, her entire energy had shifted. The past hadn't changed, but her relationship with it had. She was no longer a victim of her history. She was its student, its interpreter, its master. You cannot change your past, but you can change how you carry it. This truth applies to every aspect of life: career setbacks, personal failures, missed opportunities, or painful relationships. The events themselves are fixed, but their meaning in your life is fluid, determined by how you choose to frame them. Think of your past like a backpack. You can fill it with rocks that weigh you down, or with tools that help you climb higher. The choice is yours. Every experience you've had, every mistake you've made, every heartbreak you've endured, these can become either anchors that hold you back or lessons that propel you forward. Your past is a chapter, not your entire book. The challenge for today: identify one painful memory or regret you've been holding on to. Ask yourself, what lesson can I take from this? How can I use it to grow? Let go of the weight that's been holding you back. Your future is waiting. Chapter 8: The Science of Everyday Joy. Let me expand on this chapter about finding joy in small moments, maintaining the established tone while diving deeper into the theme. In 2016, a 106-year-old woman named Virginia McLaurin was invited to the White House to meet President Obama. As soon as she saw him, she didn't shake his hand politely. She danced. With a huge grin, she twirled and laughed, radiating pure joy. This moment went viral, not because of her age, but because of what she embodied, the ability to find happiness in the smallest moments. If a woman who had lived through segregation, war, and decades of hardship could still dance with joy, what does that say about the happiness available to you every day? Virginia's life wasn't easy. Born in 1909 in South Carolina, she lived through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement, and countless personal struggles. Yet, when asked about her secret to happiness, she would often say, "I just live and enjoy life as it comes." Her viral dance wasn't just a moment of excitement. It was the culmination of a lifetime spent choosing joy in small moments. The science behind happiness reveals something fascinating. Your brain doesn't actually distinguish between big and small moments of joy. When you experience something pleasant, whether it's winning an award or simply smelling fresh coffee, your brain releases the same neurotransmitters. Dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin don't wait for life-changing events. They respond to any positive experience you fully engage with. Research has shown that people who practice mindful appreciation of small moments report significantly higher levels of life satisfaction than those who only celebrate major achievements. This isn't just feel-good science. It's about rewiring your brain's reward system to find joy in the everyday. Most people think happiness comes from big life changes, winning the lottery, finding love, or getting their dream job. But research shows that lasting happiness actually comes from small, daily moments of joy. Dopamine, the brain's feel-good chemical, is released not just from major life events, but from simple experiences. A funny conversation, a warm cup of coffee, a favorite song. The problem? Most people don't notice or appreciate these moments because they're too focused on chasing the next big thing. Think about your own life. How many beautiful moments have you missed while waiting for something bigger to happen? How many sunsets have you ignored while checking your phone? How many laughs with friends have you rushed through while thinking about tomorrow's meeting? The secret to everyday joy isn't about waiting for perfect circumstances. It's about training yourself to see and savor happiness in the now. This isn't about forcing positivity or pretending everything is perfect. It's about developing the skill of noticing and appreciating the good that already exists in your life. Meet Javier, a busy entrepreneur who was constantly stressed, believing he'd only be happy once his business took off. His days were a blur of meetings, emails, and endless to-do lists. Even when good things happened, he barely noticed them. He was too focused on the next goal, the next milestone, the next problem to solve. But after reading about micro moments of joy, he decided to experiment. Instead of rushing through life, he started pausing to appreciate small things: his morning coffee, the sound of birds, a joke with a friend. He began keeping a joy journal, noting 3 tiny moments of happiness each day. At first it felt forced, but slowly something shifted. He started noticing more positive moments naturally. The smell of rain became a moment of peace. His daughter's morning bedhead became a source of laughter. A perfect parking spot became a small victory worth celebrating. Within weeks, his stress levels dropped, and he felt happier. Not because his life had changed, but because his perspective had. His business challenges were still there, but they no longer consumed him. He had learned that happiness isn't about what's missing. It's about what you choose to notice. The practice became contagious. His employees noticed his changed energy and started their own joy-spotting practices. Team meetings began with sharing small victories. The entire office culture shifted from stress-focused to appreciation-focused. Productivity actually increased, not from pressure, but from positivity. Every day is filled with small moments of joy. You just have to look for them. Your challenge today: find and savor one tiny moment of happiness. Whether it's a favorite song, a kind text, or a deep breath, pause and appreciate it. Train your brain to see joy, and joy will find you. Chapter 9. The Transformative Power of Gratitude. John Kralich's life was falling apart in ways that would break most people. His law firm teetered on the edge of bankruptcy, his second marriage had crumbled, and he found himself living in a small apartment where the temperature would drop to near freezing at night. Walking through the cold hills of Pasadena on New Year's Day, he heard a small voice in his head suggesting that until he learned to be grateful for what he had, he wouldn't receive more. That moment of clarity led to an experiment that would transform his life, writing one thank you note every day for an entire year. He began with simple acknowledgments, thanking the barista who remembered his coffee order, expressing gratitude to clients who paid their bills on time, appreciating his son for small acts of kindness. Each note required him to focus on something positive, something worth acknowledging. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, something remarkable happened. The simple act of looking for things to be grateful for began changing how he saw his world. His relationships deepened. His law practice started turning around. Even his health improved. But the most significant change wasn't in his circumstances. It was in his mind. The science behind gratitude reveals why Kralich's experiment worked so powerfully. Research shows that people who practice daily gratitude experience a 25% increase in happiness levels, sleep better, and even show improved cardiac health markers. Researchers found that grateful people not only feel better about their lives, but also experience enhanced empathy, reduced aggression, and improved self-esteem. This isn't just feel-good science. It's about fundamental changes in brain chemistry. When you practice gratitude, your brain releases dopamine and serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitters that enhance your mood and create positive feedback loops. The more you practice gratitude, the more your brain becomes wired to look for things to be grateful for. But here's what makes gratitude truly transformative. It works even when, especially when, life isn't perfect. In fact, practicing gratitude during difficult times can be your most powerful tool for resilience. It's not about denying problems or pretending everything is fine. Instead, it's about training your brain to see the full picture of your life, including the good that exists alongside the challenges. Take Polly, a high-powered executive who struggled with chronic anxiety. Her mind constantly raced with worst-case scenarios, deadlines, and potential failures. At her therapist's suggestion, she started a nightly gratitude practice, writing down 3 things she was thankful for, no matter how small. At first, it felt forced and artificial. Some nights, exhausted and stressed, she could barely think of anything. But she persisted, sometimes writing about things as simple as her morning coffee or the way sunlight filtered through her office window. Gradually, something shifted. She noticed herself looking for things to add to her gratitude list throughout the day. A colleague's kind word, a project completed on time, even a parking spot opening up just when she needed it. These small moments began to stand out instead of getting lost in the blur of stress and worry. Within months, her anxiety hadn't disappeared, but it had changed. The constant parade of worries was interrupted by moments of appreciation. She found herself sleeping better, connecting more deeply with her team, and feeling more present in her daily life. Her circumstances hadn't dramatically changed, but her experience of them had transformed. The key to Polly's transformation wasn't just writing down grateful thoughts, it was actively training herself to notice positive moments as they happened. This is what psychologists call gratitude spotting, the practice of intentionally looking for things to appreciate throughout your day. This proactive approach to gratitude creates what researchers call an upward spiral. The more you notice things to be grateful for, the better you feel. The better you feel, the more you notice. It's a self-reinforcing cycle that can lift you out of negative thought patterns and into a more positive, resilient state of mind. Think about your own life for a moment. Even on your worst days, there are dozens of things working in your favor. Your heart beating, clean water to drink, the ability to hear these words. These aren't small things. They're fundamental gifts that millions of people don't have. Yet we often take them for granted because we're too focused on what's wrong or what's missing. This is where the real power of gratitude lies, not in denying difficulties, but in expanding your perspective to include both challenges and blessings. It's about training your mind to see the full truth of your life, not just the problems. The practice of gratitude doesn't require special tools or techniques. You don't need to write elaborate thank you notes like John Kralik, though you certainly can. You can start right now with something as simple as acknowledging 3 things you're grateful for. The key is consistency, making gratitude a daily habit rather than an occasional practice. Your challenge today: write down 3 specific things you're grateful for. Don't just list them, explain why. Instead of my family, write the way my sister called just to check on me. Instead of my job, write the fact that my work allows me to help others. Be specific, be personal, and most importantly, be honest. Chapter 10. Designing Your Happiness. In 1995, a young woman named Vera Wang faced what felt like the end of her dreams. After dedicating years to figure skating, training countless hours, and sacrificing everything for her Olympic aspirations, she failed to make the U.S. team. At 23, an age when many athletes are in their prime, she found herself at a crossroads that would have broken most people's spirit. But Wang's story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Instead of letting failure define her, she pivoted into fashion journalism at Vogue. Even then, she didn't know she would become one of the world's most celebrated designers. She simply followed her instincts, taking one step at a time toward what felt right. Today, her name is synonymous with luxury fashion, proving that our greatest setbacks can lead to unexpected triumphs. The real power of Wang's story isn't just about career change, it's about the courage to release an identity that no longer serves you and create space for who you're becoming. This is where most people get stuck. They cling to paths they've outgrown, relationships that drain them, or goals that belong to someone else's vision of success. Research reveals that authentic happiness stems from 3 key elements: autonomy, having control over your choices; purpose, feeling your life has meaning; and engagement, being fully absorbed in activities that challenge and fulfill you. Notice what's missing from this list: money, status, or achieving specific goals. This isn't just feel-good theory. It's backed by hard science. Studies show that people who align their daily activities with their values report significantly higher levels of life satisfaction than those who achieve conventional success but feel disconnected from their authentic selves. Your brain releases more dopamine and serotonin, the happiness chemicals, when you're engaged in activities that genuinely matter to you, regardless of external rewards. Think about Marco, a certified public accountant who spent 8 years building a successful career that left him feeling empty inside. Every morning, he'd stare at his reflection, barely recognizing the person looking back. His salary was impressive, his resume spotless, but his soul was slowly dying. Instead of making a dramatic leap, Marco started small. He bought a camera and began spending his weekends photographing local events. At first, it was just an escape, a way to survive the work week. But as his skills improved and his portfolio grew, he started getting paid gigs. Within 2 years, his hobby was generating enough income for him to reduce his accounting hours. By year 3, he had fully transitioned into professional photography. The key to Marco's transformation wasn't just following his passion. It was making strategic, incremental changes that built a bridge from where he was to where he wanted to be. He didn't jump without a parachute. He designed his transition with intention and patience. This approach to happiness, what psychologists call life design, is about making small, deliberate choices that gradually align your external reality with your internal values. It's not about having a perfect plan or waiting for permission. It's about taking ownership of your happiness through conscious action. Start by asking yourself, what activities make you lose track of time? What work feels energizing rather than draining? What relationships bring out your best self? These questions aren't just philosophical. They're diagnostic tools for designing a life that fits who you really are. Chapter 11. The Art of Letting Go. Bruce Lee, one of the greatest martial artists of all time, once said, "Be water, my friend." His philosophy wasn't just about fighting, it was about life. When water encounters an obstacle, it doesn't fight or break. it flows around it, finding new paths forward. Water's strength lies not in its ability to resist, but in its power to adapt. This wisdom holds a profound truth about happiness that most people miss. True strength comes from learning to let go, not from trying to control everything. In 1970, during the filming of Enter the Dragon, Lee faced a moment that would test this philosophy personally. The studio wanted to change his vision for the film, pushing for more Hollywood-style scenes that went against his artistic integrity. Instead of engaging in a bitter battle, Lee chose to adapt. He found creative ways to incorporate both visions, resulting in a masterpiece that would influence martial arts films for generations. By letting go of his rigid expectations while maintaining his core principles, he created something even better than his original vision. This lesson extends far beyond filmmaking or martial arts. The people who suffer most in life are often those who resist reality the most fiercely, who fight against change, who refuse to accept what is, who try to control every outcome. They're like someone trying to grip water tightly in their fist. The harder they squeeze, the more it slips away. Modern psychology, particularly acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, confirms what ancient wisdom has long taught. Psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt and let go, is crucial for mental health and happiness. Studies show that people who score high in psychological flexibility experience less anxiety, depression, and stress, even when facing significant life challenges. This principle of letting go applies to virtually every area of life where we experience suffering. Relationships. When you stop trying to change or fix others and accept them as they are, you create space for authentic connection. Career. When you release attachment to specific outcomes and focus instead on giving your best effort, you perform better and suffer less. Personal growth. When you let go of perfectionism and accept that progress includes setbacks, you actually move forward faster. The story of Elena illustrates this powerfully. For years, she poured her energy into fixing a toxic relationship, convinced that if she just tried hard enough, said the right things, or changed herself enough, she could make it work. Her happiness became dependent on someone else's validation and love. The turning point came when she realized that her desperate grip on the relationship was actually strangling it, and herself. The moment she let go, choosing her own well-being over the exhausting pursuit of someone else's love, everything shifted. Initially, letting go felt like giving up, but gradually she discovered it was actually giving herself permission to live. The first few weeks were terrifying, Elena recalls. I had built my whole identity around being the person who never gives up, who can make anything work through sheer force of will. Letting go felt like failure. But as the weeks passed, she noticed something changing. Her anxiety decreased. Her confidence returned. She started sleeping better, laughing more, rediscovering parts of herself she had forgotten. This isn't just about relationships. Think about what you're holding on to right now that's causing you pain. A grudge that's poisoning your peace of mind? An outdated self-image that no longer serves you? Expectations about how life should be? These attachments are like heavy weights you've been carrying so long you've forgotten they're optional. Research in neuroscience shows that letting go isn't just psychological, it has physical benefits too. Studies have found that practices involving conscious release of tension and mental attachments can lower cortisol levels, reduce inflammation, and improve immune function. Your body literally functions better when you're not in a constant state of resistance. But here's the crucial distinction. Letting go doesn't mean not caring. It doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on what matters to you. Instead, it means releasing your attachment to specific outcomes while staying committed to your values and efforts. It's about recognizing what you can and cannot control, and choosing to focus your energy where it can actually make a difference. Think of it like gardening. You can prepare the soil, plant the seeds, provide water and nutrients, but you can't control exactly how or when the plants will grow. A skilled gardener knows this and doesn't waste energy fighting natural processes. Instead, they create the best possible conditions and then trust in the process. The same principle applies to happiness. You can create conditions that support your well-being, take actions aligned with your values, and cultivate positive habits. But trying to force yourself to feel happy in every moment is like trying to control the weather. True peace comes from learning to be present with whatever is, while maintaining a gentle, persistent effort toward what matters to you. This is where most people get stuck. They mistake letting go for giving up, or they try to use letting go as another form of control. I'm going to let go perfectly. The key is to approach it with curiosity and compassion, recognizing that it's a practice, not a destination. Freedom begins the moment you stop forcing things to be a certain way. Your challenge today: write down something you've been clinging to, a past mistake, an expectation, a relationship, or an outcome, and make the conscious decision to let it go. The lighter you travel, the happier you'll be. Chapter 12: Finding Light in the Dark. In 2010, 33 miners in Chile faced what seemed like an impossible situation. When the San Jose copper gold mine collapsed, they were trapped 2,300 feet underground with minimal supplies and no guarantee of rescue. The darkness was absolute, the air was thick with uncertainty, and hope seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford. Yet in those depths, they demonstrated one of humanity's most remarkable qualities: the ability to find light even in the darkest moments. For 69 days, these men did more than just survive. They created a community. They organized their limited food into meals that they shared together. They designated areas for exercise, prayer, and even entertainment. They appointed leaders and maintained routines. Most importantly, they refused to let despair win. Even when their situation seemed hopeless, they chose to believe in the possibility of rescue. Their story illuminates a profound truth about human resilience. Happiness isn't about avoiding darkness. It's about learning to see in it. The miners could have given in to panic or despair. Instead, they chose to focus on what they could control and find meaning in their struggle. Studies show that individuals who manage to maintain hope during adversity not only survive their ordeals, but often emerge stronger, with deeper appreciation for life and greater emotional resilience. The key lies in perspective. When facing hardship, most people ask, "Why is this happening to me?" This question leads down a spiral of victimhood and helplessness. But those who thrive in adversity ask different questions. What can I learn from this? How can I use this experience to grow stronger? Omar's story perfectly illustrates this principle. After 15 years at the same company, he was suddenly laid off during a corporate restructuring. The initial shock was devastating. His identity had been deeply tied to his role, and without it, he felt lost. Depression set in quickly, and for weeks, he could barely leave his bed. "I kept asking myself why this had happened to me," Omar recalls. "I had given everything to that company. I was good at my job. It felt so unfair." But after weeks of suffering, he realized something crucial. His questions were keeping him stuck. Instead of dwelling on why, Omar started asking what next. He used his severance pay to enroll in digital marketing courses, something he'd always been curious about but never had time to explore. He joined online communities, started freelancing to build experience, and gradually discovered a passion for this new field. "Looking back now, losing my job was the wake-up call I needed," Omar says. "I was comfortable but not fulfilled. This tragedy forced me to reinvent myself." Within a year, Omar had landed a position at a startup where he felt more alive and engaged than he had in years. The darkness hadn't destroyed him, it had transformed him. This pattern repeats across countless stories of resilience. Whether it's health challenges, relationship endings, financial setbacks, or personal failures, those who emerge stronger share a common approach. They refuse to let their circumstances define their story. Study in that our brains actually become stronger through adversity, but only if we engage with our challenges rather than avoid them. It's similar to how muscles grow stronger through resistance. The key is not to seek out suffering, but to know how to use it when it inevitably arrives. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it isn't. The Chilean miners didn't deny their fear or uncertainty. Omar didn't pretend losing his job was wonderful. Instead, they acknowledged their reality while choosing to focus on what they could control and learn. Here are the crucial elements they all employed: maintaining routine and structure even when everything feels chaotic, finding meaning beyond the immediate circumstance, supporting others and accepting support, focusing on small, manageable steps rather than overwhelming big pictures, believing in the possibility of a better future, even without guarantees. The darkness in your life, whether it's depression, loss, failure, or uncertainty, doesn't have to be the end of your story. Like the miners who found ways to create community in complete darkness, like Omar, who used his setback as a catalyst for growth, you can learn to find light in your struggles. Your challenge today: identify one past hardship that actually made you stronger. Write down specifically what you learned or how you grew from that experience. Then remind yourself, if you survived that, you can survive what you're facing now. Strength isn't about never struggling. It's about never giving up. Chapter 13. Rising Above Toxic Waters. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama. This moment, crystallized in history books, often overshadows the deeper story of her quiet strength. For years before that fateful December day, Parks faced daily harassment as an NAACP activist. She endured threatening phone calls, was regularly followed home, and weathered countless racial slurs. Yet through it all, she maintained a remarkable composure that went beyond mere patience. It was strategic resilience. What made Parks extraordinary wasn't just her courage to say no on that bus. It was her ability to channel her anger into purposeful action rather than letting it consume her. She later wrote, "I had been pushed around all my life and felt at this moment that I couldn't take it anymore. Yet I had decided that I would have to know once and for all what rights I had as a human being and a citizen." This control over her emotional responses didn't come naturally. It was cultivated through years of practice. Parks understood something fundamental about human nature. Reacting with anger, while natural, often gives others power over your inner state. Instead, she chose dignity as her weapon, proving that true strength lies not in how loudly you can shout, but in how steadily you can stand. The world today might look different from 1955 Montgomery, but difficult people remain a universal challenge. They show up as the colleague who undermines you in meetings, the family member who criticizes your every decision, or the neighbor who seems determined to make your life harder. These interactions can feel like daily paper cuts to your soul, slowly draining your joy and peace. Study in emotional intelligence reveals a startling truth. The average person spends 2.5 hours per day dealing with difficult people. That's equivalent to 912 hours per year, nearly 38 days of your life, potentially lost to toxic interactions. But here's where most people get it wrong. They either choose aggressive confrontation or passive submission, neither of which leads to lasting peace. The science of emotional regulation offers a better way. Studies show that people who master emotional detachment, the ability to observe negative interactions without absorbing them, experience 60% less stress and report higher levels of life satisfaction. This isn't about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about creating healthy emotional boundaries. Consider Carlos, a marketing manager whose story illustrates this principle in action. His boss, Jennifer, had a habit of publicly criticizing his work, often in front of clients. At first, Carlos internalized every barbed comment. He'd lie awake at night rehearsing arguments or imagining quitting in dramatic fashion. His work suffered, his health declined, and his home life began to crumble. "I gave her so much power," Carlos recalls, "not just over my workday, but over my entire life. I was letting her live rent-free in my head, even when I was supposed to be enjoying time with my family." The turning point came when Carlos learned about emotional detachment. He started practicing what psychologists call the observer technique, viewing difficult interactions as if watching a movie. When Jennifer would criticize him, instead of immediately reacting, he'd mentally step back and observe the situation. "I started noticing patterns," he says. "Her worst outbursts always happened when she was under pressure from upper management. Her criticism said more about her struggles than my performance." Carlos began implementing clear boundaries. He documented everything, communicated via email when possible, and scheduled regular one-on-one meetings to address concerns professionally. Most importantly, he stopped taking her behavior personally. The moment I realized her actions were about her and not me, everything shifted. I still had to deal with her daily, but she no longer had the power to ruin my day. Within 3 months, Carlos's stress levels dropped significantly. His performance improved because he was focusing on his work instead of his boss's moods. Surprisingly, his changed response even led to a slight improvement in Jennifer's behavior. When her attacks stopped getting an emotional reaction, they gradually decreased. This pattern of emotional mastery shows up repeatedly in studies of successful people. Those who thrive despite toxic environments share common practices. They maintain emotional distance without losing empathy. They understand that difficult people often act from their own pain or insecurity. They set clear, firm boundaries without aggression. They decide what behavior they will and won't accept, communicating these limits calmly and consistently. They focus on what they can control, their responses, their boundaries, their actions, rather than trying to change others. They practice self-care and energy protection, recognizing that dealing with difficult people requires extra emotional resources. This approach isn't about becoming passive or letting people walk all over you. It's about choosing your battles wisely and responding from a place of strength rather than reactivity. As Rosa Parks demonstrated, sometimes the most powerful response to toxicity is dignified resistance. Study shows that people who master emotional detachment report a 70% increase in perceived life satisfaction. They experience better sleep, improved relationships, and greater career success. The key is understanding that emotional detachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring for yourself enough to not let others' behavior destroy your peace. Think about the difficult people in your own life. How much power have you given them over your emotional state? How often do you replay their words or actions in your mind, letting them steal your present moment? Your happiness is too valuable to be controlled by someone else's inability to manage their own emotions. Just as Rosa Parks chose dignity over reactivity, you can choose peace over emotional entanglement. Your challenge today. Identify one difficult person in your life and make a conscious decision that they will no longer control your emotional state. Write down their typical triggers and plan your calm, detached response. Remember, you can't control their behavior, but you absolutely can control your reaction to it. Your peace is your power. Guard it wisely. Chapter 14. The Art of Rising. In 1993, J.K. Rowling sat in an Edinburgh cafe, nursing a single cup of coffee while her baby daughter slept beside her. The heat from the cup barely warmed her frozen fingers as she wrote in longhand, unable to afford paper to print her manuscript. Depression clouded her days. Divorce had left her nearly destitute, and rejection letters from publishers piled up like fallen leaves. But in those dark moments, something remarkable was happening. She was crafting a story about a boy wizard that would eventually captivate millions. The 12 publishers who rejected Harry Potter didn't just say no, some were ruthlessly dismissive. One even suggested she take a writing course. Each rejection was a punch to the gut, a reason to quit, a validation of every doubt that whispered she was wasting her time. But Rowling did something extraordinary. She kept writing, not because she was certain of success, but because the alternative, giving up, wasn't an option she could live with. Rock bottom, she later said, became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. This wasn't just poetic phrasing. It was a profound truth about resilience. Sometimes, the moments that feel like endings are actually beginnings in disguise. The science of resilience reveals something fascinating. It's not your circumstances that determine your success. It's your response to them. Studies in neuroplasticity show that every time you bounce back from failure, you literally rewire your brain to become stronger. It's like building emotional muscle. Each setback, properly processed, makes you more capable of handling the next challenge. Research found that people with high resilience scores experience 60% less stress, recover from setbacks twice as fast, and report significantly higher life satisfaction than those who let failure define them. But here's what's really interesting. Resilience isn't a trait you're born with. It's a skill you can develop. The psychology of resilience reveals three key components that separate those who bounce back from those who stay down. First, there's perspective. Resilient people view setbacks as temporary and specific, not permanent and pervasive. When something goes wrong, they don't think everything is ruined. They think this particular thing didn't work out yet. Second, there's purpose. People who recover quickly from failure maintain a sense of meaning that transcends their immediate circumstances. They're driven by something bigger than their current challenge. Third, there's pragmatism. Instead of getting lost in emotion or self-pity, they focus on what they can learn and what they can do next. Meet Noor, whose story exemplifies these principles in action. After graduating with honors in business, she invested her life savings, $50,000, into launching a premium meal delivery service. The timing seemed perfect. The market research looked promising, and her passion was undeniable. 6 months later, she was broke, in debt, and facing the crushing reality that her dream had failed. "I spent 3 days crying," she recalls. "I felt like a complete failure. But on the 4th day, I opened my laptop and started a document called What Went Wrong. Not to torture myself, but to learn." This simple act, choosing analysis over anguish, marked the beginning of her comeback. She discovered that while her food quality was excellent, her pricing strategy was flawed, her marketing too broad, and her operational costs unsustainable. These weren't comfortable realizations, but they were valuable lessons. Instead of letting shame or regret paralyze her, Noor used these insights to craft a new business plan. This time she focused on corporate catering, higher volume, more predictable demand, and lower marketing costs. She borrowed money from her sister, much less than before, and launched again. "The second time around, I wasn't just passionate, I was prepared," she says. "Every mistake from my first business became a guidebook for what not to do." 2 years later, her catering company was serving major tech companies in Silicon Valley, generating 7-figure revenue. The key wasn't that she avoided failure, it's that she refused to let failure be the end of her story. This pattern of turning setbacks into comebacks appears repeatedly in studies of successful people. They share common practices that anyone can learn. They maintain perspective by asking better questions. Instead of "why me?" they ask, "what's next?" Instead of "what's wrong?" they ask, "what's possible?" They process emotions without getting stuck in them. They acknowledge pain, fear, or disappointment, but don't let these feelings dictate their actions. They focus on what they can control. Rather than dwelling on circumstances beyond their influence, they channel their energy into actionable steps forward. Study in cognitive behavioral therapy shows that these practices literally change your brain chemistry. When you consistently respond to setbacks with resilience, you create new neural pathways that make bouncing back easier each time. Think about a setback you're facing right now. Maybe it's a professional disappointment, a personal rejection, or a dream that hasn't materialized the way you hoped. How much energy have you spent wishing things were different? How much time have you lost to replaying what went wrong? What if, instead, you viewed this challenge as J.K. Rowling viewed those rejection letters, not as proof of failure, but as steps on the path to something greater? What if, like Noor, you transformed your setbacks into lessons that make you stronger? Your capacity for resilience is far greater than you realize. Every time you choose to get back up, to learn instead of lament, to try again instead of give up, you're not just handling a single setback, you're building the strength to handle any challenge life throws your way. Your challenge today. Think of a recent setback and ask yourself, what did this teach me? How can I use this to improve? Write down 3 specific lessons and 1 action step you can take based on what you've learned. Remember, if you're still breathing, you're still in the game. Keep going. Chapter 15. The Inner Symphony. In 1972, a man named John Francis witnessed an oil spill that devastated San Francisco Bay. As he watched the black tide destroy wildlife and poison the waters, something inside him shifted fundamentally. While others debated solutions, he made a radical choice that would seem incomprehensible to most. He stopped speaking entirely, and committed to walking everywhere instead of using motorized vehicles. His vow of silence lasted 17 years, during which he walked across continents, earned a PhD, and discovered something profound about human nature. Happiness isn't found in the external noise of life. It's cultivated in moments of deep inner peace. During his silent years, Francis learned to communicate through gesture, art, and the banjo. He walked thousands of miles, crossing the United States twice and much of South America. Without words to defend himself or explain his choices, he faced ridicule, skepticism, and countless challenges. Yet in this radical experiment, he found an unexpected truth. The less he relied on external validation and conventional measures of success, the more profound his sense of contentment became. The science of happiness reveals something fascinating about Francis's experience. Research in neuroscience shows that our brains are constantly scanning our environment for threats and problems. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism. But this same mechanism can trap us in a cycle of dissatisfaction, always looking for what's wrong instead of what's right. The breakthrough comes when we realize that happiness isn't dependent on external circumstances. It's a skill we can cultivate through intentional practice. Studies in positive psychology, particularly the work of Dr. Martin Seligman, have identified 3 core components of lasting happiness: gratitude, perspective, and purpose. These aren't just feel-good concepts, they're practical tools that can rewire your brain for joy. When you consistently practice gratitude, you activate the production of dopamine and serotonin, neurotransmitters that promote feelings of well-being. When you shift your perspective, you create new neural pathways that make positive thinking more automatic. When you connect with purpose, you engage the brain's reward centers in ways that create sustainable satisfaction. But here's what's really interesting. These components aren't dependent on external circumstances. You don't need a perfect life, a fat bank account, or even a voice, as John Francis proved, to access them. They're internal choices available to you at any moment, regardless of what's happening around you. Observe David, a former Wall Street trader whose mood used to swing wildly with the market. When stocks were up, he was elated. When they dropped, he was devastated. His happiness was completely tethered to external events beyond his control. "I was living on an emotional roller coaster," he recalls. "Every day my worth as a person seemed to rise and fall with the Dow Jones." The turning point came after a particularly brutal market crash left him feeling hollow, despite still having significant wealth. "I realized I had built my entire sense of well-being on something I couldn't control," he says. "It was exhausting and ultimately unsustainable." That's when David began studying mindfulness and the science of happiness. He started small, just 5 minutes each morning practicing gratitude, regardless of what the markets were doing. He began looking for positive aspects in challenging situations, not to deny reality, but to maintain perspective. Most importantly, he connected with a deeper sense of purpose beyond his professional identity. The change wasn't instant, he admits, but it was profound. "I started noticing things I'd been too busy to see before. My daughter's laugh, the way sunlight hit the trees in the morning, the satisfaction of helping others. These weren't just nice moments. They became anchors of genuine happiness that no market fluctuation could touch." The transformation wasn't about his circumstances. David still faced the same market volatility and professional pressures. The difference was in his response to them. He had developed what psychologists call emotional resilience, the ability to maintain inner stability regardless of external chaos. The study found that happiness isn't determined by wealth, status, or even health. It's most strongly influenced by the quality of our relationships and our ability to find meaning in both good times and challenges. This brings us back to John Francis. During his years of silence, he developed an extraordinary capacity for presence. Without words to defend his choices or explain his journey, he learned to find peace in simply being. His happiness didn't come from convincing others he was right or achieving external markers of success. It came from aligning his actions with his values and finding purpose in environmental education and personal growth. The implications for your own happiness journey are profound. Right now, You might be waiting for something external to change before you allow yourself to be happy. A better job, more money, a different relationship, or improved circumstances. But what if happiness isn't waiting for you in some future achievement? What if it's available right now, in this moment, through the choices you make about how to perceive and engage with your life? This doesn't mean ignoring real problems or pretending everything is perfect. Instead, it means developing what psychologists call tragic optimism, the ability to maintain hope and find meaning even in difficult circumstances. It's about building an internal foundation of well-being that external events can't easily shake. Think about your own life for a moment. How often do you postpone happiness, telling yourself you'll be content when certain conditions are met? How much of your emotional state depends on things outside your control? What would change if you started treating happiness not as a destination, but as a practice, something you actively cultivate regardless of circumstances? The path to lasting happiness isn't about changing everything in your external world. It's about developing new internal habits. Like John Francis walking across continents one step at a time, or David rebuilding his relationship with success one morning at a time, you can begin this journey with small, consistent choices. Start with gratitude, not as a superficial exercise, but as a deliberate practice of noticing and appreciating what's already good in your life. Shift your perspective, not by denying challenges, but by looking for opportunities for growth and learning within them. Connect with purpose, not through grand gestures, but through small, meaningful actions that align with your values. Remember, happiness isn't a temporary feeling to chase, it's a mindset to cultivate. It's not about having a perfect life. It's about learning to find beauty, meaning, and joy in the life you have while working toward the life you want. Conclusion. The journey you've undertaken through this audiobook isn't just about understanding happiness. It's about transforming how you live. Think back to where you started. Perhaps you were waiting for happiness to find you, believing it would arrive with the next achievement, relationship, or milestone. Now you understand that true happiness isn't something that happens to you. It's something you actively create. Each chapter has equipped you with tools that many spend lifetimes searching for. You now understand that gratitude isn't just a practice. It's a perspective that can reshape your entire reality. You've learned that resilience isn't about avoiding falls. It's about mastering the art of rising. You've discovered that letting go isn't weakness. It's the ultimate form of strength. But here's what makes this moment powerful. You're not just listening to an audiobook of theories. You're holding a roadmap to transformation. Every strategy, every insight, every mindset shift you've encountered has been tested and proven, not just by famous figures or scientific studies, but by countless individuals who decided to take control of their happiness. Will there be challenges ahead? Absolutely. Will you face moments of doubt, stress, or uncertainty? Without question. But now you're equipped with something powerful, the knowledge that these moments don't define you. You can choose your response. You can shift your perspective. You can create joy even when circumstances aren't perfect. This isn't about becoming a different person. It's about becoming more fully yourself. It's about recognizing that happiness isn't a destination you reach, but a skill you develop, a choice you make, and a life you build, one moment at a time. Your journey to lasting happiness starts now, not when conditions are perfect, not when life gets easier, but right here, in this moment. You have the tools. You have the understanding. You have the power to create the life you want. The question isn't whether you can do it. You absolutely can. The question is, will you? Will you take what you've learned and put it into practice? Will you choose happiness, not as a fleeting emotion, but as a way of life? Will you commit to being the architect of your own joy? This is your moment, your opportunity, your beginning. The good life isn't waiting for you somewhere in the future. It's waiting for you to create it, starting now. Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Your potential is endless. Now go out there and create the life you deserve.